Brother took 30K from me, called it ancient history when I wanted it back, and then posted. 5 years ago, I made what I thought was a good-hearted decision, trusting my brother James with $30,000 of my inheritance. I thought I was doing the right thing, being the dependable sibling and stepping in during his time of need. What I did not realize at the time was that my decision would not only jeopardize my financial future, but also unravel the trust I once had in him. Fast forward to today, and here I am, watching his Instagram stories filled with luxury vacations to the Maldives and brand new gadgets while he has yet to repay a single cent of what he owes me. To make matters worse, James is now facing prison time for committing fraud. And suddenly, I am the one he is begging for forgiveness. Funny how life works. Let me take you back to the start of this nightmare. In 2019, our beloved grandmother passed away, leaving me an inheritance of $50,000. This money felt like a lifeline. For years, I had been scrimping and saving for a down payment on a home, and now, with this windfall, my dream was within reach. The housing market was heating up in our area, and I was eager to make my move. I had done everything right, built my credit score, researched home buying programs, and even had a short list of properties I was ready to bid on. Life felt like it was finally falling into place. But then James, my older brother, came knocking on my door with tears in his eyes, and everything changed. James and I had been close growing up, but as adults, we had drifted apart. I chose the traditional route: college, a stable job, careful planning for the future. James, on the other hand, was always the risk taker, diving headfirst into entrepreneurial ventures. Sometimes his gambles paid off. Other times, they left him scrambling. That night, James was at his breaking point. His latest business had tanked due to poor management and a sluggish economy. He was 3 months behind on his mortgage, his credit cards were maxed out, and his wife Sarah was threatening to leave him if he could not get their finances in order. My niece and nephew, who were 10 and 8 at the time, were at risk of losing their home. The thought of my brother's family being torn apart tugged at my heartstrings. James had always been the golden child in our family, the entrepreneurial son my parents pinned their hopes on. Over the years, they had funneled money into his ventures, losing a significant amount during the recession. By 2019, their finances were tight, and they could no longer bail him out. That left me as his last resort. He needed $30,000 to stabilize his business and save his home, and he swore up and down that he would repay me within a year, with interest. I was hesitant, but James knew exactly which buttons to press. He invoked our childhood bond, recalling moments where he supposedly looked out for me, though my memory of those times was quite different. He even cried while talking about how he could not bear to tell his kids they might lose their home and school. Against my better judgment, I agreed to lend him the money, but not without conditions. I insisted on a written agreement detailing the loan amount, the interest rate, and the 1-year repayment timeline. James signed it without hesitation, even laughing at my insistence on having it notarized. At the time, I felt reassured by the formality of the arrangement. Surely, I thought, my brother would honor his word. For the first few months, James bombarded me with optimistic updates about how his business was turning around. Then the updates started to dwindle, and the tone shifted. As the 1-year repayment deadline approached, excuses began rolling in. There was an unexpected business expense. His son needed emergency dental work. His wife's car broke down. Each excuse seemed plausible on its own, but together, they painted a troubling pattern. By the 2nd year, I was beyond frustrated. The housing market had skyrocketed, pricing me out of properties I could have afforded with my original down payment. Meanwhile, I was stuck in an expensive rental, watching my savings dwindle while James's social media told a very different story. Despite his claims of financial hardship, James was posting photos of home renovations, a brand new gaming setup, and weekend getaways. The final straw came when he and Sarah jetted off to the Maldives, filling their Instagram feed with sunsets, spa days, and luxury accommodations. It was a slap in the face. I confronted James, but he brushed me off, calling the loan ancient history and accusing me of being petty. He dismissed the notarized agreement as meaningless and claimed I was blowing things out of proportion. I felt betrayed, not just by his actions, but by the casual way he disregarded my sacrifice and trust. Now James is facing serious legal trouble. It turns out his financial woes drove him to commit fraud, and he is now staring down the possibility of prison time. He has reached out to me, begging for help, forgiveness, and support. For the first time in years, I have the upper hand, but I'm left wondering what price I am willing to pay for closure. Nothing extravagant enough to call him out on directly, but enough to make me question his claims of financial hardship. It was never one big thing, just little clues here and there. The occasional luxury item he'd flaunt, the surprise upgrades to his car, or the brand new gadgets he always seemed to have. These weren't red flags waving in my face, but they were enough to leave me with a nagging feeling that his cries of financial struggle might not be the whole truth. I tried bringing up the loan in person at family gatherings, thinking maybe a face-to-face conversation would make it harder for him to brush me off. But James became a master of avoidance. If I so much as approached him, he'd suddenly be urgently needed somewhere else, helping with the kids, handling an imaginary crisis, or taking an important business call that conveniently required him to step away. It was infuriating, but also oddly impressive how skilled he'd become at dodging me without raising too many eyebrows. When I confided in our parents, hoping they'd see my side and offer some support, I was met with the classic family mantra: be patient, be understanding. Family helps family. It stung, hearing those words thrown back at me because, as far as I was concerned, I had already lived up to that mantra. I had helped family. I had gone out on a limb for James when he needed it most, trusting that he'd do the right thing. Instead, I felt like I'd been left hanging, taken advantage of by someone who clearly didn't share the same values. This limbo went on for years. Awkward encounters, unfulfilled promises, and mounting resentment. Then, last week, everything came to a head. James posted on social media about his upcoming dream vacation to the Maldives. And this wasn't just any vacation. This was first-class flights, an overwater bungalow at a 5-star resort, and a packed itinerary of excursions that screamed luxury. From what I could piece together, the total cost of this treat-yourself extravaganza was well over $15,000. I couldn't believe my eyes. Just 3 days prior, James had sent me a lengthy text message about how he was still struggling financially and needed more time before he could even start repaying the loan. The audacity of it all hit me like a punch to the gut. Here he was posting selfies with captions like, "Living my best life," and "Treat yourself, you deserve it," while I was sitting at home, still reeling from years of stress caused by his inability or unwillingness to pay me back. Something inside me snapped. I sent him a direct message, pointing out the glaring contradiction between his financial claims and his lavish vacation. I reminded him that the money he was spending could have gone toward repaying the debt he owed me. His response was the final straw. "Come on, that was 5 years ago. Ancient history. You can't expect me to put my whole life on hold over ancient history. I'll pay you back when I can, but I need to live my life too. Ancient history." Those words echoed in my mind, each repetition stoking the fire of my frustration. My lost opportunity to buy a house before the market skyrocketed? Ancient history. The years of stress and resentment as I watched him live comfortably while dodging my every attempt to hold him accountable? Ancient history. The fact that I delayed starting my own family because I couldn't afford it without the financial cushion he had taken from me? Apparently, that too was just ancient history. I decided enough was enough. I consulted a lawyer who reviewed the notarized agreement James and I had signed all those years ago. To my relief, they confirmed it was legally binding. Armed with this confirmation, I initiated legal action to recover not just the principal amount, but also the accumulated interest. When I informed James of my decision, he exploded. He called me heartless, accused me of tearing the family apart, and claimed I was ruining his life over just money. As expected, the family quickly took sides, and it became painfully clear who most of them were siding with. My parents told me I was being too harsh, that I needed to be more understanding of James's situation. They conveniently ignored the fact that my situation, my stress, my sacrifices, existed solely because I had been understanding of his. Even our extended family has joined the fray. Aunts, uncles, and cousins have reached out, expressing their disappointment in me for going after my own brother. I've been called selfish, cruel, and unforgiving. But no one seems to care that I've spent the past 5 years being the understanding sibling, the one who put my own needs on hold, the one who got taken advantage of. I'm done. I refuse to be the family doormat any longer. But as I sit here writing this, I can't help but wonder, am I the asshole for finally standing up for myself and asking for what is rightfully mine? Update 1. First of all, I want to sincerely thank everyone for the supportive comments and advice. It has been overwhelming and deeply appreciated. I also want to address some common questions that have been coming up. Yes, I have the loan agreement in writing, and it was notarized. A lot of you have mentioned that I should have asked for collateral as well, and you are absolutely right. Looking back, I realize how naive I was, but I never imagined my own brother would betray me like this. For those wondering why it took me 5 years to act, I want to clarify that I did not just sit idle. I have tried countless times to resolve this amicably. I have documented over 30 attempts to discuss repayment, and every single time, I was either met with excuses or completely ignored. I wanted to be understanding because he had a family to support, a decision I now regret more than words can express. Some people have suggested that I might be jealous of my brother's success. Let me be very clear. I am not jealous of someone who built their so-called success on stolen money. What I feel is anger and hurt. Anger at being taken advantage of, and hurt that someone I trusted could do this to me. It is infuriating to watch him flaunt his lifestyle on social media, showcasing vacations and luxury purchases funded by the money he owes me, while I have been left to pick up the pieces of my own financial stability. To those saying, family is more important than money, I have to ask, where was that sentiment when he was blowing thousands on trips to the Maldives instead of paying me back? Why am I the only one expected to make sacrifices for the sake of family? Now, let me address the family dynamics, since many of you have asked. Yes, my parents have always favored James. This loan is just the latest chapter in a long, painful pattern. I grew up in his shadow, watching him get praised for every small achievement while my own accomplishments were dismissed or overlooked. And now, here we are, me, the ungrateful sibling standing up for myself, and him, the victim spinning a tale of hardship to avoid accountability. It has been 2 weeks since I sent the legal notice to James, and the fallout has been worse than I could have imagined. I thought I was prepared for the drama, but watching my family take sides has been both enlightening and devastating. The morning after the notice was sent, my phone exploded with calls and messages. James had spent the night contacting every family member, painting himself as the victim. His version of the story conveniently left out the notarized agreement, the years of ignored attempts at repayment, and, of course, the extravagant vacations. That evening, my parents showed up unannounced at my apartment. My mother was in tears, and my father had the same disappointed look that always made me cave as a child. They sat at my kitchen table, armed with emotional manipulation tactics. My mother started with, "How could you be so heartless? He has children to think about. What kind of person tries to bankrupt their own brother over money?" She went on to imply that my single status meant I did not have real responsibilities, unlike James, who had a family to support. The way she spat out the word single as if it was a moral failing stung more than I expected. I tried to remind her that my own life plans had been derailed by this loan, but she dismissed it with, "You're single. You have time to recover. James has responsibilities." When I pointed out James's recent luxury vacations as evidence that he was not struggling financially, my father defended him. "He works hard. He deserves to enjoy life a little." That was the breaking point for me. I pulled out the folder I had been compiling for months. It contained screenshots of James's social media posts, documenting his pattern of lavish spending. There were also copies of texts and emails where I had tried to collect the debt, only to be met with dismissive responses. Most importantly, I included a detailed calculation of how much money I had lost by not being able to buy a house when I originally planned to. My parents' reactions were telling. My mother refused to look at the evidence, literally turning away from the laptop screen. My father examined everything carefully, but still insisted there must be another way to resolve this without legal action. When I asked him what that alternative might be, given that I had spent 5 years trying to resolve this peacefully, he had no answer. They left shortly after, my mother in tears and my father shaking his head. As they walked out, my mother said, "I hope you're happy knowing you're tearing this family apart. When you're old and alone, remember this moment. Remember how you chose money over family." The hypocrisy was staggering. This was coming from the same people who had no issue watching me struggle financially for years while praising James for his business acumen. The fallout extended beyond my parents. James's wife, Sarah, has been harassing me with hostile voicemails. In one particularly nasty message, she screamed, "How dare you do this to us? Do you know how this is affecting our children?" The audacity of that statement left me speechless. Where was this concern for her children when James was using my money to fund their vacations? Their uncle is actively trying to bankrupt their parents over grievances from decades ago, something most people would have written off as water under the bridge by now. When I did not immediately respond to her barrage of calls, she escalated to sending me long, emotionally manipulative text messages. These were not just casual complaints or expressions of frustration, they were carefully crafted attacks on my character. She called me selfish, heartless, and accused me of being envious of their so-called success. According to her, my actions were purely driven by jealousy, as though I was trying to dismantle their lives simply because I couldn't stand to see them happy. One of her texts had the audacity to suggest that I should be thankful they were finally living their best life, because it meant they'd be in a position to repay me someday. But that wasn't all. She twisted the knife further by writing, "You are just bitter because you are still renting while we own our home. Maybe if you worked as hard as James does instead of trying to leech off his success, you'd have a place of your own by now." It was that message that finally pushed me over the edge. Up until that point, I had avoided looking too closely at James's business finances out of respect for their privacy. But her words fueled something in me, a mix of hurt, anger, and determination. And I decided to dig deeper. What I found was infuriating. James's business had actually recovered remarkably well after the initial crisis, the very crisis that had led him to ask me for a loan in the first place. By the end of the first year, his company was not only stable but generating a healthy profit. By the third year, he had expanded to a second location, a clear indication that things were going well for him. All the while, he continued to claim he was struggling to make ends meet. And there was Sarah, fully benefiting from the profits of what was essentially stolen money, yet still having the gall to label me a leech. The most vindictive part of me wanted to post all of this evidence publicly on social media. I imagined attaching screenshots of financial records to their vacation photos with captions like, "Funded by unpaid debts." But my lawyer strongly advised against it, cautioning that such actions could complicate the legal process. Instead, I've been methodically documenting everything. Every accusatory text from relatives, every boastful social media post flaunting their luxury purchases, every email where James admitted owing me money but stubbornly refused to pay. One of the most surreal moments came during a meeting with my lawyer. As we were discussing his response to the lawsuit, James posted a new vacation photo. There he was, lounging in an infinity pool overlooking the ocean, captioned, "Living my best life, ignoring the haters." The timestamp on the post? It matched our meeting time to discuss his refusal to pay back what he owed. My lawyer has been reviewing the growing pile of evidence against him, signed agreements, proof of his ability to pay, and countless examples of his discretionary spending. It has become glaringly obvious that this is not a case of "I can't pay," but rather a blatant case of "I won't pay." This is especially clear now, given that James's financial disclosure included a detail that stopped me in my tracks. His recent Maldives vacation had been paid for in full, in cash, just 2 days after he last texted me saying he could not afford to start repaying the loan. Despite everything, some family members continue to pressure me to drop the lawsuit. They argue that pursuing this will only destroy the family over money, as if I am the one causing the damage. What they fail to understand is that the destruction started the moment James decided to exploit my trust and kindness. I am not destroying the family. I am simply refusing to maintain the illusion that everything is fine while being blatantly taken advantage of. The next hearing is scheduled for next week. While this process has taken an emotional toll on me, I am more determined than ever to see it through. This is not just about the money. It is about standing up for myself, for the years of manipulation, and for the principle that my trust cannot be abused without consequences. I'll post another update after the hearing if there are any significant developments. Thank you to everyone who has offered their support and validation. It means the world to me to know I am not alone in this, and that standing up for myself is not only justified, but necessary. Update 2. After my last update, things have taken an unexpected turn, and honestly, it feels like I am riding a roller coaster of both vindication and frustration. If that sounds contradictory, it is because the situation is both better and worse in ways I could not have anticipated. Yesterday marked the day of the initial court hearing, and let me just say, it was a revelation. New details emerged that confirmed beyond a doubt that pursuing legal action against James was not only justified but absolutely necessary. As part of the discovery process, my lawyer requested a comprehensive set of James's financial records. I had braced myself for some unpleasant truths, but what we uncovered was far worse than I ever imagined. For starters, it turns out his business rebounded within months of receiving the loan from me, a fact he conveniently failed to mention. Even more disturbing was the elaborate facade he has been maintaining for years. To me, he played the role of a struggling entrepreneur barely scraping by. To his wife Sarah and their social circle, however, he painted a picture of a thriving businessman gearing up for expansions. The audacity of it all was mind-boggling. Do you remember how Sarah had been bombarding me with hateful messages accusing me of trying to bankrupt their family? As it turns out, James has been feeding her lies too, but in the exact opposite direction of the lies he told me. While he sobbed to me about financial hardship and his inability to pay me back even small amounts, he was bragging to Sarah about their financial success. And those vacations? The Maldives trip, which already felt like a slap in the face, wasn't even their priciest indulgence this year. In January, they went on a luxury cruise that cost nearly $20,000. But James, ever the schemer, kept that little jaunt off social media because he was busy telling me he couldn't afford to make repayments. The sheer gall is almost laughable. During the hearing, James tried to pull a fast one by claiming that the loan agreement between us should be voided on account of us being family. He even had the nerve to argue that he signed it under emotional distress. Unfortunately for him, the judge was not buying it. My lawyer presented his recent bank statements alongside text messages where he claimed he was struggling financially. Watching James squirm as his lies unraveled in court was, admittedly, a small victory. If I could frame the moment his face fell when those statements were revealed, I would hang it on my wall as a testament to justice. One of the most infuriating revelations was learning that James had taken out a business loan 3 years ago to open a second location. He had been diligently paying off that loan without issue, proving he could have been paying me back all along. When the judge asked him why he prioritized his bank loan over the debt he owed to me, his response was both telling and infuriating. He said the bank would not understand family circumstances like my sister should. The audacity was astounding. My parents were present in the courtroom as well, though they had not informed me they would be attending. My mother spent most of the hearing letting out audible gasps each time new evidence was revealed, as if she could not fathom her beloved son's actions. My father, on the other hand, sat silently, his face growing redder with each passing minute. At first I thought he was furious with James, but during the recess, he cornered me in the hallway. Whisper yelling, he accused me of humiliating the family by bringing our private matters into the public eye. I wanted to scream back at him that it was James who humiliated me for 5 years, forcing me to struggle with rising rent while he used my money for lavish vacations. But I followed my lawyer's advice and walked away. The biggest bombshell came when we discovered that James had used my loan as proof of assets when applying for his business loan. He had listed it as a private investment in his business plan, effectively inflating his capital and committing fraud to secure more funds from the bank. Not only did he deceive me to get the loan, but he also used that deception as a stepping stone for even greater financial gain. When my lawyer saw the documentation, her eyes practically lit up with the possibilities for further legal action. As for Sarah, she has gone uncharacteristically quiet. After weeks of sending me hostile messages, I am guessing she finally saw the full extent of James's financial lies and realized just how much he has been deceiving everyone, including her. While part of me feels sorry for her, I cannot forget the cruel things she said about me being jealous of their success. Any sympathy I might have had quickly evaporates when I think of the years I spent struggling while they lived extravagantly. The judge has ordered a full forensic accounting of James's business and personal finances for the past 5 years. James's lawyer tried to argue that such measures were unnecessary, but the judge was firm, citing the overwhelming evidence of financial deception already uncovered. Another hearing has been scheduled for 2 weeks, once the forensic accounting is complete. In the meantime, I am dealing with backlash from certain family members. Word has spread about what came out in court, and some relatives are pressuring me to drop the case to preserve the family's reputation. They keep telling me I should be ashamed of myself for destroying my brother's good name. But here's the thing. I did not destroy anything. James did that all by himself when he chose to lie and manipulate for years. All I am doing is pulling back the curtain on his schemes. Some have even suggested I accept a partial repayment to keep the peace. But peace was never an option the moment I uncovered the full scope of James's betrayal. This is no longer just about the $30,000 he owes me. It is about holding him accountable for years of deceit and ensuring that he does not get away with it. Update 3. The forensic accounting results have finally arrived, and let me tell you, my lawyer was not exaggerating when she hinted at the surprises waiting for us. I needed a few days to let everything sink in before writing this update because the truth we uncovered goes far beyond my loan. For those of you who speculated in the comments about potential bank fraud, congratulations, you were absolutely right. James did not just use my loan as proof of assets for one business loan. What he was orchestrating was a highly complex shell game involving multiple banks. He used the same assets, including my $30,000 investment, as collateral for various loans. Each new loan propped up the last, creating an illusion of exponential business growth. It is clear now that my money was the initial building block for a financial house of cards, which is beginning to crumble under scrutiny. The forensic accountant discovered something infuriating. In the first year after borrowing my money, James's business actually generated over $200,000 in profit. Instead of using that windfall to repay me, he took a large chunk of it to put a down payment on an investment property. That property then became collateral for additional loans. All the while, James kept telling me he was struggling financially, painting himself as a victim of hard economic times. Meanwhile, he was using my money as leverage to build a personal real estate empire. During the most recent court hearing, James tried a new tactic. Through his lawyer, he offered to repay the full $30,000 plus interest if I agreed to sign a non-disclosure agreement. This agreement would have prohibited me from sharing any information about his financial practices with the banks he borrowed from. The judge's reaction was nothing short of cinematic. She actually laughed out loud. She then sternly reminded his lawyer that attempting to hide evidence of bank fraud with an NDA could easily be interpreted as conspiracy. Unfortunately, my parents have now done a complete 180 in their support, but not in the way you might think. Instead of recognizing James's wrongdoing, they have doubled down on blaming me. According to them, none of this would have happened if I had not selfishly pursued legal action. My mom even had the audacity to say I was destroying my brother's life over what she called a little loan between family. When I pointed out that bank fraud is a federal crime, my dad snapped, saying I should be ashamed of myself for caring more about financial institutions than my own brother. To add another layer of drama, Sarah, James's wife, has filed for separation. But her reasoning is not what you would expect. It is not because of the lying or the fraud. No, Sarah is upset because the impending legal consequences could disrupt their lifestyle. She sent me a lengthy email blaming me for exposing James's financial misconduct, which she claims has now forced her to leave him. Apparently, I should have been willing to swallow the $30,000 loss so her children could continue enjoying their luxury vacations. The forensic accountant also uncovered more shocking information. James has been funneling money into offshore accounts. Remember that extravagant cruise they took in January? It was paid for through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. My lawyer estimates that over the past 3 years, James has hidden more than $500,000 offshore, all while pleading poverty and claiming he could not repay my $30,000. The judge has now frozen all of James's known assets while the investigation continues. Predictably, his lawyer tried to argue that this was unnecessary since James had offered to repay me. However, given the overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud, the court was not taking any chances. My lawyer emphasized that this case is no longer about my loan. It is about uncovering what could be years of financial crimes. After the hearing, James approached me directly for the first time in months. He was crying, saying he never meant for things to spiral out of control. He claimed that he had always intended to pay me back, but every time an opportunity to expand his business came up, he convinced himself that it would ultimately benefit everyone in the long run. When I asked why he spent money on luxury vacations instead of repaying me, he gave an astonishing response. I had to maintain appearances for business networking. The criminal investigation has now officially commenced. It is no longer just about me, my loan, or even my family. It is about bringing James to justice for what looks like a web of deceit spun over years. My lawyer told me to brace myself because things might get messier before they get better. At first, I did not quite understand what he meant, but now it's becoming painfully clear. Some of James's business associates are already under questioning, and there's growing talk of a wider fraud investigation involving multiple banks. Every day, I wake up to a whirlwind of updates, legal paperwork, and family drama that feels like it has no end. I am doing my best to stay focused on the legal proceedings and to avoid letting the emotional weight of it all consume me. But it is hard. It is so hard. My parents will not stop trying to guilt trip me into dropping everything, calling me selfish for pushing this forward. Do it before it's too late, they say over and over again. Too late for what exactly? Too late for James to avoid facing the consequences of his actions? Too late to keep the truth about his shady business practices buried? They refuse to say it out loud, but I know that's what they mean. My lawyer has strongly advised me against sharing any more specifics about the ongoing investigation, so this update might be the last one for a while. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who has reached out with support and advice. Your words have meant more to me than you can imagine. For those who have asked, yes, I am in therapy. It is not easy to unpack everything I am feeling, but therapy is helping me process the weight of this mess. And no, I do not regret pursuing legal action, not for a second. If anything, the deeper we dig into James's financial dealings, the more I am convinced that I made the right choice. Final update. It has been almost 2 years since my last update, and I finally feel ready to share how everything unfolded. So much has happened in that time, and I needed to wait until all the legal matters were fully resolved before writing this final post. When the criminal investigation into James's financial dealings wrapped up, it revealed even more than anyone could have predicted. For the past 5 years, he had been pulling off an elaborate scam, taking out multiple loans using the same collateral, creating fake business documentation, and misrepresenting assets to various banks. My $30,000 loan? It was just the tiniest tip of a much larger iceberg. James had essentially been running a Ponzi scheme, using new loans to pay off old ones while pocketing the difference. In the end, James accepted a plea deal. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with the possibility of early release for good behavior, and ordered to pay significant fines and restitution to the defrauded banks. The judge also mandated the liquidation of his assets to pay off his debts, which included my loan. I am relieved to say that I finally got my $30,000 back, along with interest and coverage for my legal fees. My parents, on the other hand, have not taken this well. My mother has been in tears almost non-stop since James's sentencing, and my father has barely spoken to me. They have decided to sell their house to help cover James's legal fees and are moving into a smaller place. Watching them sacrifice their retirement savings to clean up James's mess while still defending his actions is like a dagger to my heart. It's equal parts infuriating and heartbreaking. Sarah finalized her divorce from James last month. She is going around telling anyone who will listen that she was blindsided by his financial schemes and that she is the real victim here. Honestly, it is hard for me to believe her. She seemed perfectly content to enjoy luxury vacations and harass me about my loan while ignoring all the red flags. Now, she has moved back in with her parents and is trying to maintain her previous lifestyle by demanding excessive alimony, even though most of James's assets are being seized to pay off his debts. As if all this was not enough, James made one last attempt at manipulation before reporting to prison. He sent me a letter claiming to be filled with remorse and begging for my forgiveness. The letter was a masterclass in deflection and self-pity. It was filled with fabricated childhood memories, excuses about feeling pressured to succeed, and empty promises that he always intended to pay me back. He even had the audacity to ask me to speak at his sentencing, vouching for his character and framing this entire ordeal as a misunderstanding between siblings. I did not respond. After everything he has done, he still cannot resist playing the victim and using family ties to escape accountability. Some people in my life have suggested that James might genuinely be reflecting on his actions, that prison might change him for the better. But I know better. Manipulators do not change. They just adapt their tactics to suit their current situation. Now that this chapter of my life is finally closed, I am moving forward. With the money I got back, I made a down payment on a house. The housing market is still brutal, but at least I am no longer stuck in the rental cycle. It is not the dream home I could have bought 5 years ago, but it is mine, and I earned it through hard work and integrity. As for my parents, I am giving them the space they need to process everything. Whether they eventually understand why I chose to hold James accountable or not, I have made peace with the outcome. This was never about revenge. It was about doing what was right and refusing to enable destructive behavior any longer. There may still be some loose ends as the banks pursue civil cases against James, but I will not be posting any more updates. This chapter of my life is over, and I am ready to leave it behind. To everyone who supported me through this journey, thank you. Your encouragement kept me going, even when my own family tried to make me doubt myself.